is about assessing our students, evaluating our students in two different ways. One is formative, and the other one is summative. Starts with an introduction in a statement of the problem and the rationale. After that, I'll talk about roles of each summative and formative assessments, followed by composition of formative assessments that I would like to emphasize, and there's a discussion and conclusion. I'll start with the introduction. Not only in primary schools, but in higher education as well, we as educators realize the importance of accurately and subjectively measuring our students' performance in order to advance our students to the higher level, close the learning gap between the high achieving and lower achieving students, and in order to select suitable learning means for each student. However, we have observed that teachers do not necessarily effectively practice precise or accurate student assessment. These collected data do not necessarily represent students' authentic level of their performance. Summative assessment is an easy way to evaluate students' performance because it is very convenient. However, some of the problems that summative assessment approach could entail is ignoring the learner's multidimensional aspects. And there is no further opportunities for the students to develop. So are we really assessing the students or evaluating the students? Assessment is referring to the judgment on the learner's work and does not talk about any further for students' further development. On the other hand, evaluation talks about or refers to judgment on the process of making process. So am I saying that we need to trash out the summative assessment and just go for the formative assessment? No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm trying to talk about how to balance these two approaches for the best evaluation of our students. So let me talk about the roles that each summative and formative assessments has. First, the summative assessment. This is the practice we do every semester. It is very important to accurately measure the student's performance, as I talked about it previously. Well, they are repeated here. Summative assessment mainly refers to a single point of judgment. Below average, average, or above average, or A+, A, B-, etc. So Sharkey and Murnane said that summative assessment is to teach, test, and hope for the best, which is what I did for the last semester, I have to confess. And this is an overemphasized method that teachers and professors stick to a lot. On the other hand, formative assessment requires accurate feedback as to the student work. So these types of accurate feedback can benefit both parties of the learners and the teachers. So how do we apply those formative assessment usage to our classroom teachers? Well, teachers need to have questioning techniques. They need to provide students with feedback that has no grades. We have to, as educators, encourage our students to conduct a self-assessment in order to emphasize the importance and the effect of the teacher feedback and professional development, of course. So what are some relationships can we find between the summative and formative assessments? I have to tell you that summative assessment and formative assessment are not mutually exclusive in practice, meaning that teachers or the educators or the professors have to use both of the approaches in our practice in order to bring out the best of the each. So both summative and formative assessments are considered as processes So if I have to talk about the difference between those two means, summative assessment stops at the judgment of the student work, whereas formative assessment makes some suggestions for the future or further development of the students by giving constructive feedback to them. And what are some important components that formative assessment has? Well, feedback is the most important component of the formative assessment. Students can find teacher feedback much useful in order to develop their skills further. However, because the teacher feedback usually contains negative comments about students' work, the students usually feel resistant or feel very negative toward the teacher feedback itself. And the formative assessment by nature requires the feedback as it indicates the gap between the learner's status quo and goals that are set by the instructors. We have two types of feedback that we can provide to the students. One is directive and the other one is facilitative. And you can look at some of the examples there. As I have emphasized before, feedback without grades or without students' negative judgments can facilitate their learning so much. Of course, we do have some obstacles when using or applying teacher feedback to the students. One of them is asking for only fact-related questions. Most of the teachers I know are not trained to provide very constructive feedback for a great interaction with the students. They tend to focus on the fact-related questions. Teachers also lack, as I've talked before, lack knowledge in terms of making effective feedback usages for the students. And teachers usually do not know how to utilize students' knowledge for their career and plans. So these are some professional development that we can offer to the teachers, as well as college professors. Okay, discussions. We know that teachers have this tendency to use summative assessments forms over the formative assessment because of these reasons: convenience, easiness, and explicitness. The problems that this type of unidimensional method could cause include losing other potentials that students can hold and making unnecessary ranks among them. So if we rate our students by single grade without any feedback, it's going to cause these problems that are listed in the middle of the slide. How can formative assessment methods resolve these issues? Well, we can acknowledge students' formal achievements and enhancing them, and we can provide guidelines to the students regarding the goalpost, have them acknowledge the gap between their goalpost and their status quo. So these are some implications that we can make in the higher education that we are in. And thank you, and I'm open for a question.